My name is Sam. I'm the Partnerships and Communications Manager here at Fairygodboss. Fairygodboss is the largest career community for women. Our mission is to improve the workplace by increasing transparency, and we offer a variety of free resources like anonymous company reviews, job listings, articles, virtual recruiting events, and so much more. Before we get started, we will be taking questions at the end of this webinar. Feel free to leave them in the Q&A, and you can leave questions as yourself or anonymously, so feel free to ask anything. We're also going to be recording the webinar and sending it out afterwards, so if you miss anything or you want to rewatch something back or share it with a friend, you'll totally have the ability to do so. Here with me today is Tami Forman from Path Forward. Tami is the Executive Director of Path Forward, a nonprofit that creates mid-career internship programs to ease the transition back to work for women and men after taking a break for raising children or other caregiving responsibilities. Tami has built the organization from the ground up, working with donors, partners, and participants to fill the organization's mission. Thanks for being here today, Tami. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Samantha. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We are huge Fairygodboss fans. We have a group on Fairygodboss, which I'll talk about at the end, but I am here to talk about returnships, and very excited to do so. So Path Forward, as Samantha mentioned, we are a nonprofit organization. Our mission is to empower caregivers, and yes, we work with both men and women, but as you can see from this photo, mostly women, to get them back to work, to empower them to return to their professional careers. We do that by partnering with amazing companies to create mid-career returnship programs. So we partner with the employer to help them, to help the HR and the hiring managers to launch these programs and make them successful. So that's what I'm here to talk to you about today. So there are a lot of roads back to the workforce, and I will go ahead and highly recommend Fairygodboss as a great resource for information about updating resumes and interviews and cover letters and all the things that are helpful for anyone at any stage of their career, and are helpful for people who are looking for ways to get back into the workforce. Returnships are one of those roads. They're one way to get back to professional work, and they're a way that has gotten a lot more publicity in the last couple of years, some of that driven by us, so we're excited about that. And a lot more companies are creating these kinds of programs. So we've worked with about 60, but we know of at least another 40 or 50 companies across the country, and some around the world that are creating these kinds of programs. So you have likely heard about returnships, but having heard about them, you may not know exactly what they are, and what the components are. So that's the point of today's webinar and what I'll dive into. So at the very highest level, a returnship is a temporary program. They're generally anywhere between 12 and 24 weeks. The Path Forward program is 16. Usually, most of our partners run a 16 4-month program, but they're generally in that 3 to 6 month time frame. They are paid. They are mid-level, meaning they are aimed at people who have 5 or more years of professional experience. They include specific functional qualifications, and they require, and I'm going to underline the word require, a cap for caregiving. So I'm going to talk about all of these elements, but that's sort of the basic components of a returnship. There are a lot of ships out there, so I want to differentiate because it may be that term sounds familiar to you, but it's easy to get confused between the different types of programs. So many of you are probably familiar with college internships. Many of you may have done college internships. So a college internship usually requires a demonstration of interest, which might be your major, whatever, but you don't really have to have any experience. That's kind of the whole point of a college internship. They generally don't have training, though, at the same time. So you don't have any experience, but they're really not training you. They're just kind of giving you exposure to the job, and giving you a chance to meet people who are doing the job that you're, in theory, in school for. There's very little expectation with a college internship that it's necessarily going to immediately convert into a full-time job, right? It's meant to be for the summer while you're between your semesters. And college internships are valuable. They're valuable for developing skills and expanding your network. Apprenticeships are another thing we're seeing more of. This is a trend that's, this is as old as time practically, right? Like this is something that's existed in Europe for a long time, and certainly some types of apprenticeships have existed here for a long time. These are programs that require some demonstrated interest, so you need to be interested in what that apprenticeship is about. but you need to desire to be trained, and then it includes training. So these are usually associated with trades, but as the economy has changed and expanded, we're starting to see apprenticeships programs in different types of areas, so not just in trades, and these tend to convert at a high level to full-time. So returnships are different from those. So what a returnship is a program that is also temporary but requires relevant skills, has mentoring but not training. These also convert to full-time jobs at a high rate. We see in our program about 80% of people convert into full-time jobs with that company. Across returnships at other companies where we track data and take a look at what we see pretty high rates in that range. And they tend to be aimed at specific populations, right? So like caregivers, which we'll talk a little bit more about. So what does it mean to say, that a program requires a gap for caregiving? A return path, and certainly there are programs that have different requirements. And for us, we want to be very open and inclusive. We're not looking to exclude people. We are looking to be a very open and an inclusive program, but we are also looking to be focused on helping people who we believe are specifically disadvantaged, right? People who have been out of the workforce for 2 years or more, right? So out of the full-time professional workforce for 2 years or more. So this is not, as some people sometimes ask me, like the thing you do after maternity leave, right? This is meant to be like, oh, you really took a step back from your career. And but it can mean all kinds of caregiving. Many of the people in our programs were out of the workforce for childcare, but we also see people come into our program because they had to take time off for elder care. A spouse got sick. They needed to move across the country because their spouse got a job in a different city or a different country even, and they had to get everyone settled. All of those things are things we think of as caregiving, as falling under the umbrella of putting your family first, taking time away from your professional career, and needing help to get back in. So when I think about the skills that are required for someone to be successful in a returnship, I think of the, if you knew how to ride a bike, you still know how to ride a bike analogy, right? You may not have ridden a bike in 10 years. I don't remember, frankly. I live in New York City. I can't remember the last time I rode a bike. Not much of a bike on the streets of Manhattan kind of gal. But I know how to ride a bike. I could do it tomorrow if I had to, right? So the skills that you acquired in the first 5, 10, maybe even 15 years of your career have not gone away. You still have those skills. It may take you a couple months, which is the point of a return path, to feel fully proficient in those skills again, but you don't need to relearn them. Now, this is a funny area, right? Because we know that a lot of women in general, never mind if they've taken a gap, right? Or taken time away from their career, women in general tend to think they have to, fill every single checkbox on a very long list of requirements for every job that they apply for. And we know that you don't need to meet every single requirement on a job in general to be successful. And I would say the same thing is true of returnships, right? But the way I think about it is, if you were an engineer, you can go into an engineering returnship, right? If you were a marketer, you can go into a marketing returnship, right? You are going to have skills that are directly relevant. You're going to have skills that are transferable, and you're going to be able to fill in any gaps you have pretty quickly as you get back up and running. So that's how I think about skills. Now, obviously, any returnship is going to have its own job descriptions. You should look at those, but at a conceptual level, that's how I think about returning to a career you had, returning to a career where you have the skills and experience based on your past to be successful, as opposed to thinking about a pivot, right? Thinking about a career change. So I have seen people successfully pivot with returnships, but it's definitely a little bit different. And I think how big of a pivot you're making kind of determines whether or not a returnship is the right road for your return, if that's what you're looking to do. I would say the bigger the difference between your old career and your desired new career, the less likely that a returnship is the right approach, the more likely that you might want to think about making a case for an entry-level job in the new career. Still leveraging some of your skills, but again, the bigger the divergence. And it also depends on what other kinds of skill development you're doing. So what I advise people who are looking to pivot at the same time that they're looking to return is to really do your research and possibly even work with a coach if you're able to do the things that any career changer would do. There's a lot of great information out there about changing careers and how to do that successfully. How to inventory your prior skills, how to see which is transferable, how to add, like, right, this is something to think about. And while the process is different if you're returning versus doing it while you're in career, it's not that different. So understanding how to make that shift, and then a returnship can be very valuable. Like a returnship could be a way, again, depending on that difference, to make that jump back in. So what I think makes returnships really shine as an opportunity for those who are looking to return is the support that's available in many of them. Now, like anything, every company runs their own program, and this is definitely an area, as you know, if you get to a point where you're interviewing with a company about their returnship program, to ask about. But generally, these programs are created within a company, are predicated on the idea that there's people who have amazing skills, amazing experience, have educational credentials, all the things that we are looking for as a company in today's skilled workforce, but they need some support in on-ramping back into the workforce. So the returnship program, some companies do actually include some training alongside them, but even the ones that don't include any kind of specific training include support that might look like mentoring programs that give you access to executives. It might be a lunch and learn, different things like that, right? So they're really set up to provide that. When we run a program with a company, at Path Forward, we also provide support. So we do workshops both virtually through Zoom, which is a very fun platform for us to use, and also in person, where we get returnees together across the employers that we work with, and help to support them and help them support each other. So this is a great part of this of the returnship model. There's often, if you are looking at returnships at a company that's been running them for a couple years, there's often alumni from previous rounds who are also available for support. So that's another great thing about these programs. So there's a lot of support that's available at all of these, at many of these companies. So pay is probably one of the questions I get asked about most frequently when I speak on returnships, and they do pay. Turns out you can't make people work for free in America, so that's a good thing. And the way to think about the returnship pay is this is a program that is focused on mentoring development. So it should pay you at a rate that is commensurate with the work that you will be doing, but also recognizes the fact that you are also getting learning and development and an opportunity to get exposed to the company and the people within that company and the support that is a part of that program. We see pay rates range, depends on the market and the function, right? So like returnships are just like any other job. People in highly desired returnship functions tend to command a slightly higher hourly rate than those in not as in demand, but we see anywhere between $30 and $60 an hour. What I recommend people do is focus less on the returnship pay, right, for the 12 or 16 or 24 weeks of the program, and more on understanding what the job it might convert into. I don't recommend that people try to negotiate the pay rate for the returnship itself, but it's perfectly appropriate in an interview about a returnship to say, hey, this all sounds great. If I were to be considered for full-time employment, you know, what is the general pay range for a job like this at your company, and to get a sense. And it is definitely more than appropriate if you are offered that full-time job at the end of the returnship to negotiate that full-time package. And when we work with returnees in our programs, we talk very specifically about how to do that, and how to negotiate that final package. So you sort of look at that first 3 to 4 to 6 months as an opportunity to get paid to learn, and then the opportunity to negotiate comes at the end. I also get asked a lot about flexibility, and the way I think about returnships is returnships are most appropriate for people who are looking to return to full-time corporate work. Now, having said that, there are a lot of companies now that are starting to think about what full-time corporate work looks like and how to make that more friendly for women, for families, for caregivers of all kinds. So we certainly see many employers that we work with that have generous policies around working from home, working alternative schedules, giving generous paid time off, right? So this is a part of a lot of companies' value propositions in terms of how they think about employees. And again, this is something that is the flexibility of the returnship is generally reflective of the flexibility of that company overall. So that's a perfectly appropriate thing to be asking about through the process of looking at a returnship is like, basically what's this company's culture like around work-life balance and things like that. But if you're looking for part-time work, right? If you're looking to work 20 hours a week or less, if you're looking for something that's more like, project-based kinds of things, there are other opportunities out there. There are other organizations that focus on that piece of the puzzle. So I would say if you're looking for 100% remote schedule, we do have some companies that are starting to offer remote returnships, and that do offer full-time remote opportunities in general as part of their company. But I think those are more common outside of some of the types of employers that we work with and that offer returnships. So that's kind of how I think about it. It's more of like if you're looking to get back into full-time work but want to work in a different way, that's totally possible. If you're looking for something that's very, very different from corporate work, this is probably not the right fit for that model. And then will it lead to a full-time job? So there's two ways that I think about this. We see, as I said a couple minutes ago, we definitely see conversion rates of around 80% across all of our employers. We have seen companies that exceed that, right? We've seen companies convert their entire cohort for sure. So we definitely think we see the value of this as an opportunity to get into a company and get into a full-time job at that company. But we also see people who are able to leverage the returnship opportunity to find full-time opportunities at other companies. And the way that we generally talk to people about how to do this is what you're highlighting is that you're back, that you've had this opportunity. These are very competitive programs, right? Leaning into the idea that like, hey, it was always temporary. I knew there was a chance that it wouldn't convert into a full-time job, but my gosh, the opportunity to be part of this company, to learn this, to work on this project, here's what I did, here's what I accomplished. If you've done good work at that company, you've generally made an impression on at least a few people who can be a new reference for you, right? References is a question I get asked a lot. How do I find a reference if I haven't worked in 5 or 10 or 15 years? Well, now you've got, a bunch of them. So it definitely leads to full-time opportunity. And I have to say, I also see when I work with somebody, the difference in their demeanor from, the start of the returnship to the end, right? Like how they're sort of carrying themselves, how they're talking about themselves, how they're talking about their experience, that boost of confidence that comes from being back in the workforce for a few months and doing the things that you're good at, that you love, that you're passionate about. That energy is infectious and will come through. And we absolutely see people get into full-time work and be very, very successful. We've now been around long enough. We're headed into our 5th year that we're starting to see people from our early programs who are getting promoted. We just learned last week that a woman at one of our companies just got promoted to VP. I'm so excited. I'm like going to burst. But so this is an opportunity to get back, to get a full-time job and to advance your career. So I want to emphasize that. So, whether or not a returnship is right for you is a question only you can answer. But, I think when you put all these things together, I think this hopefully gives you a sense, right? What you did previously, what you want to do now, what kinds of work environments you want to be in, what kinds of opportunities are available. That's going to help you figure out if this is the right path. And certainly talking to some people, I highly recommend. I recommend networking to everybody. I usually talk about it so much people get sick of hearing me say the word. But this is a great opportunity to, reach out to people in your network if they work for companies that have these programs. See if you can get connected to somebody who's been through one of them. Ask some questions of people in your network who maybe work at some of these places, even in just, their impression as an employee of the program, and those kinds of things. And you can get a sense of whether or not these are the right choice for you. If you are interested in programs like this, if you're interested in pursuing returnships, then there's a couple ways to think about to go about that. So at Path Forward, we have a page on our site where you can sign up for our newsletter. And we also have many pages that have all the opportunities that are available at any time. So we have pages that are organized by city. We often have pages that are organized by the type of roles that are offered. So we are try to be an aggregator as much as possible of all of our opportunities. So you can sign up to get our newsletter, and that will give you access to all of the opportunities that we have available through our employers. When you do see those opportunities, you apply directly with that employer. So there's no Path Forward application process that you have to go through. You go directly to that employer. It does mean you can apply for any opportunity on our site. So you can apply to multiple companies that are offering Path Forward returnships if you see opportunities that are interesting to you. We also have a page on our website, and we'll include these links. Samantha will include these links in the follow-up from Fairygodboss of what we call return to work programs around the United States. So these are all the programs that we've been able to identify. We don't run them. They're not part of the Path Forward network, but they are opportunities and companies that have run or are regularly running these programs. If you, by the way, in your, there's a couple hundred of y'all on here, so we can crowdsource this information a little bit. If you see something, if you know a returnship program that is not listed on this page, please let us know. We are trying to make this as comprehensive of a listing of available opportunities as possible. We want anyone who comes to our site to find out about all the opportunities that are available. So, again, these links will get sent out to you. Lots of ways to stay connected with us on the web, through email. The picture that you're seeing on the left of your screen is the newsletter we send. So that gives you a sense of kind of the content we send, but more importantly, the job opportunities that we have available. And then we do all the social things. So link with us, Facebook with us, tweet us, toot us. Is there a binging now? Is that a thing? I don't know. Whatever it is, you do it. And I have to put in a plug for our Fairygodboss group because we love it and we're so excited to be part of it. Fairygodboss, by the way, is another great place to do research, right? So many of the companies, both ones we work with and the rest of them, are on the Fairygodboss platform. So you can go look up information. I'm sure somewhere hidden in the Fairygodboss world is information about those returnship programs as well. I'm sure someone has reviewed them over the last couple of years. So definitely a great place to get information. But the Path Forward group on Fairygodboss is a great place to connect with me, with our staff, and more importantly, with each other and share information. So, so highly recommend that you all join that. So now I'm super excited because what I now have for you all is two amazing alumni, Hagit and Nima, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves and most importantly say their last names, who have gone through our program. So Hagit is at Walmart Labs and Nima is at Lending Club. So I'm going to have them each introduce themselves, talk about their return to work experience, and then I have some questions that I'm going to ask them to get the ball rolling, and then we're going to open it up for questions. So as Samantha mentioned at the beginning, go ahead and type in all your questions. She'll be taking those and she'll ask those of me and the panelists as we get rolling. But I'm going to go ahead and open it up and start with Hagit. Hagit, hi, and please introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Hagit, last name pronounced Katzenelson. It means son of a cat's elbow in German, I kid you not. Now you'll never forget it, right, Tami? So I started out as an engineer. I did that for 5 years. I got an MBA, and I worked for about 10 more years as a product manager and various product and marketing roles, mostly at smaller companies. I took a 9-year career gap at that point, and I know someone on the chat said something about 9 years. So know that Someone has done it before you and has come back. I started my break because of really four things that came together at a difficult time in my life. I had a family member with cancer that needed care. I had a grandmother who was going through the final stages of Alzheimer. And I had three small kids and a very, very unflexible boss and work environment. And one of those things had to give. And in my case, that was the easy decision that work is not going to work in this kind of scenario. And so the first years of my break was essentially just dealing with the other three issues. But eventually my kids grew, my family member got better, my grandmother unfortunately didn't make it. But I found a desire to get back to work and to start using that part of my brain again. And of the 9 years, I can say that the last 4 or 5 of them was searching for a job. That's all I did. I also, to keep up my skills, and I know that that'll come up, I did write my own app at the time, and I did work as a consultant, but those were very part-time kind of things, mostly to use them as a stepping stone back into work. I started my Path Forward returnship last fall of 2018 at Walmart Labs in their delivery, last mile delivery group as a product manager, and I transitioned to a full-time role there when the internship ended at the end of the year. And so 2019 was fully spent at Walmart as a product manager in the same team with expanded responsibilities. And that's pretty much all about me.
Huggy. I love your story. Nima.
Hello, can you see me?
We can see you and hear you.
Okay, wonderful. Hello, everyone. My name is Nima Bolampali, and I was working for about 10 years before I had my twin boys in 2016. And my path to taking a career break was kind of serendipitous. Within a week of coming back from maternity leave, my entire team was laid off. And so I actually kind of just took it, I was already on the fence about whether I should go back to work or not. So I took it as a sign and decided to take the leap of faith. Definitely had a lot of fear and worry about what it would be like trying to get back into the workforce, but I decided I would deal with that later and try to enjoy the time that I had with them being so little. So I had done a variety of things before the twins were born, from working in banking to being at a small nonprofit and in philanthropy. So I could go on to do various things, but I think when they were about 1.5, I started just dipping my toes in the job search, trying to rebuild my network. It was, I had a lot of interviews, but I couldn't seem to kind of close the deal. And it was kind of, mind-boggling to me, but I do think that there's kind of a silent or unspoken value assigned to hiring somebody who's already in the workforce. And so, that might have been one of the factors. But when I, was a year into job searching and found out about Path Forward, I just felt like I'm going to will this to happen. And thankfully it did, and the rest is history. But definitely, I think that going into a company that's committed to Path Forward just establishes this baseline during the interview process that you're not going to be discounted for having taken time off or having not been in the workforce for a while. So I think just starting with that mutual understanding is just a really strong way to start and kind of build a relationship together. So I might be one of the anomalies where I've never worked in program management or as a TPM, but I had always done project management as part of my work. And the hiring manager who hired me was willing to take a chance. And I think that she recognized that a lot of the work I did, was related and that I could get, trained up on what I needed to do. So it's been great. It definitely took a lot of time to adjust. So I'll get into that later, but.
Yeah, Nima, I think you're a great example of sort of like what a pivot could look like. I think definitely the more varied your career was before. Like if you've already laid the groundwork for having made changes like that, you kind of already have the script in your head. And also going into a function that often pulls from different areas, right? TPMs come from all kinds of different backgrounds. So again, I think there's no one formula that I would ever point to, but there's some things that definitely make that work. So my first question for both of you is, is there anything that you either did or looking back wish you had done to make your transition easier, right? Like just because you're back in work doesn't mean all the rest of your life is suddenly like, oh, well, that's all sewn up and cool. Like what did you think about as you were transitioning back into both the returnship and full-time work that helped to make that transition easier for your family, for the rest of your life, or whatever else was going on?
Yeah, Hagit, would you like to go first? I have some thoughts.
Okay, sure. I think for my family, they knew how much I wanted this, and were really stepped up to support, at least morally. Physically, no one did the dishes more than they did before, or no one volunteered to do laundry for me. But I did have their support, and in that sense, I think it did a little bit good for them not to, to wait until I got home with a lot of the things. They were more, they welcomed that. They welcomed their a little bit increased independence, although both were high schoolers at the time. We're not talking about any big risk taking here. Mm-hmm. And I did feel a lot of love from them. And especially, I think this was really important for me to show to my daughter, who she remembered me working, but that was a very long time ago for her, again, a 9-year gap. And I think she very much admired the fact that I was making the effort to go back to work. And for them to see how long it took me to find a job and then to actually find a job, I think was also very important to see. So I think, again, like their moral support was there. The step up in chores and tasks, not so much, but I did feel a lot of love and compassion on the home front, and was able to take the time I needed to do it. I also had a lot of additional support from my husband, which I knew it would happen, and I'm glad that it did. So I think it just made that transition a whole lot easier, knowing that he would come home when I needed him to. And he said at the time when I started, he said, this is your 4 months. You're going to treat this, when we talked about this, you're going to treat this as one long interview. And just like I wouldn't interfere and call you when you were on an interview, I will not interfere in this returnship and let you do it and take the hours you need to do it. So that was also there.
God, can we bottle him, Hagit? I love
that. Yeah, well, I have. Oh, did I mention that he was also a chef and cooks at home and makes all the meals? Because if we're bottling anyone, I think that's what people come back with. Can we hire him out? Anyway, we're sidetracking here.
Yeah. Nima, what about you? Yours are a little bit littler, I think.
Yes, yeah, they're 3.5 now. So when I started, they were younger, and definitely requires a lot of mental and physical energy at this stage. So when I started, which was March of 2019, we called in reinforcement. So my mother-in-law, who's retired, I think she came and stayed with us for a month, and we're very fortunate to have that. But I think we needed time to just, it all happened very quickly. Between the time that I interviewed and started was 2 or 3 weeks. And so we just needed time to just assemble ourselves. But so that was helpful, just with helping, pick up the kids from daycare and with cooking and just getting us to survive day to day. But I think we just figured out a lot as a family as we went along. And I know that I drew a lot from the Path Forward network and the monthly seminars that we were having, just to figure out life hacks that helped other people in the program, what was just making their life more manageable, because you still have, as you alluded to, Tami, you still have just as much to do, just less time. And so that, just an example is finding someone who could pick the kids up at 3 o'clock, so that when I get home at 5 or 5:30, everyone's not in a terrible mood. So things like that have definitely helped. And I've really relied on others to kind of get that information. And we're still figuring it out, you know, it's a work in progress.
Yeah. Yeah, the transition, I think I always emphasize to people, like, you know, getting that extra support at the beginning, you won't need it forever, right? You won't.
Right.
Like, things will fall into a routine, people get used to their things, and then it'll change again, and then you'll find a new way, and that's just kind of, you know, so it goes. So for each of you, what was the best part of your returnship experience?
So I can speak to that. I think it kind of bleeds into the converting to full-time and what that's been, so kind of a longer view. But I know for me, it was 100%. I actually got feedback about that I should be more confident, that I deserve to be more confident. And so hearing that from somebody like during the returnship, I was like, oh, I didn't even realize that I was projecting that I was not confident. But it was clearly an underlying thing, you know, that was starting to show. And I think just the best thing for me was the sense of making a meaningful impact outside of the house and outside of the kids, because my entire life had been that the last couple of years, and it's still that, but just another sense of purpose. And there are still times where I just feel small thrills when I'm working on, you know, when I see the impact I'm having at work or the value that I'm creating or adding to a project. So I think that all started during the returnship and has only kind of continued to grow. So that's been really cool, and, you know, part of what makes me feel like I made the right decision.
To build upon that, that has definitely been the part that I've enjoyed most, is like having that part of my brain work again. In the returnship, what I enjoyed most about that was to be able, like, remember your analogy with the bicycle, is there are skills that I have from what, you know, from my years of experience that can come into full play in my new role. Sure, things have changed, but the basics of product management, listening to users, talking to users, understanding what they want, that hasn't. And I was so happy to be able to do that kind of work again, and to build something meaningful out of it. And that for me was the best part. So.
Yeah, and that you bring that experience with you, and you're able to, and sometimes the ways we did things actually have a ton of value in what we're still doing. So yeah, that's awesome. So I do want to, Samantha, I see that there's a lot of questions coming through, so I want to go ahead and open it up. And of course I can answer questions, and our two wonderful panelists can as well.
Yeah, no, thank you guys so much. It's been so great so far. And you are correct. We've had so many questions come through. I've been typing them all out, and I have a list that I'm going to go through.
Great.
Just want to give a heads up to the audience. A lot of questions are very specific about situations. I put a link to the Path Forward group, and I'll also be sending that link out later, as well as an email where you can contact them. So if you have a really specific situation, or you want to know specifically, like, I have X years of experience and I'm looking for jobs in Atlanta or whatever it is, you can contact them directly to get more information. Right now, we're going to go through the questions that can apply to as many people as possible, since we have about 200 people in this webinar right now.
Awesome.
So I want to start off with a really simple question. Are there any costs associated for the returnee with a returnship? Do they have to pay the company anything? Any money?
No. This is paid for experience.
Love it.
You get paid, meaning you, the person, get paid to get experience. That's yes, no, and nothing to Path Forward. Nothing to Path Forward. Employers, they get to pony up a bit for our help and support. But returnees get all the services that we provide as part of just being there.
Great. Next question. We got a lot of people asking about this. So what is the interview process like for returnship? Will I have to demonstrate certain skills? What should I prepare?
Cool. Nima, Hagit, I would love if each of you would talk about the experience you went through, and then I can kind of fill in any sort of general gaps on what we see across employers.
Okay, so I went through what is really known as a traditional product manager interview. And there's a great book called Cracking the PM Interview, which I highly recommend, because it lets you go through those scenarios before you go into the interview. And I read it in like intensely before. But this is really a traditional interview. I had interviews, my interview panel was consisted of product managers, of engineers, and they just shot questions like, what product do you like and why? What would you do in this situation where we would try this? How would you handle a prioritization of this? And so on and so forth. Some case studies, some what if, some favorites, some, some walk us through how you would do something. But that something is never like up in the air. It's always a product related question. So really, really beef up on product management related type interview questions before you come in. Aside from that, I did not see this as being any different than any kind of job interview I had been to that was of a like more for traditional full-time role. Really just a product interview.
Yeah, I would concur with that. I think my experience was a series of phone screens and then a day of in-person interview, which I think would have been the same even if it wasn't a returnship interview. So they viewed this, just in the same vein as a regular position, but, obviously with the understanding that this was a 4-month gig, with potential to convert to full-time.
Yeah, I think what I would say, sort of generally speaking, what we see across the employers we work with is they do want to make sure that if it's possible, these jobs convert. So they do go through a process that is similar, right? Because they want to make sure they're bringing in someone who can be successful in the returnship and hopefully successfully join the team. So for engineering returnships, it's very, very common for them to have a tech test, for them to, whether it's HackerRank or whatever. Those are usually calibrated, right? They do think about the way that test is calibrated for someone who's been out of the workforce. If they do a whiteboard test, they will say, use whatever language you are most comfortable with, right? So there is a calibration that is happening there. I think the most important thing, so my recommendation would be for those who are looking at these programs is to do all the things you would do to prepare for any other interview. Practice with a friend, right? All of those things. But know that you are only competing against other people that also have a gap in their resume, right? Like this is not like, oh, well, let's go with the guy who's been doing this job yesterday, right? It's like, it's competitive. There's a lot of people out there looking for these opportunities, but you are not being dinged for your gap. Someone, that I think is the thing to emphasize. And I would also say, because we see this, if you have an opportunity to do a tech test through one of these programs, do it. There are worse things in the life than not get right. Like see what happens. The feedback that you get from that can be very helpful, and it's not going to be the end of the world if you don't get through that one. If that helps you to figure out how to be successful for the next one. So don't, and also I think there are some people who are surprised at how well they do. So don't discount yourself. You might do great.
I think that's a great point to point out for a lot of people, is that you're up against people who are in the same boat as you. You're not up against somebody who has been working up until this point. You're up until somebody who also has a similar gap. So keep that in mind. But a lot of people did ask, should I take or do I need to take online courses to brush up on my skills before applying to a returnship? And if I need to take some, do you have any resources you'd recommend?
Again, I'd love Nima and Hagit to talk about some of the skill training that they did, or yeah.
Okay, so for me, it wasn't so much taking a class as to just keep myself immersed in the industry that I wanted to be part of, especially the product aspects. So there's a lot of product meetups here in the Bay Area. I just went to a whole lot of them. You listen to, it's a good opportunity to network, sure, but it's also a good opportunity to learn things. And just to make sure that when you are coming to an interview, you are not using lingo from 10 years ago. And that was for me, like, that was my main concern. So what do you call the whole product management process today? What do you call the different steps? It's changed. It's the same things, but the name and the vocab is a little bit different. So that kind of updating is what I did. And the other thing that I did was just to hone my skills by writing an app. That was really just to get the product management skills back into operating condition. It was done so that I could say, okay, what do I actually need to define a product? And I think that really helped me get the focus back into, into what skills are needed in an interview and in a job.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would say if you can carve out the time, for the online courses or something similar without compromising kind of time you're taking to cultivate your network and focus on preparing for an interview, then go for it. But most of us probably are dealing with a deficit of time, so I would just kind of keep that in your mind when you're forming your strategy for how you want to look for a job.
Yeah, in the software world, as you both well know, there's a concept of minimum viable product, right? Build the smallest incremental thing you can do. I think of it as like minimum viable learning. Like, is there a very specific skill that you need to get you from where you are to where you want to be? So some of it is about like, how long were you out of the workforce?
Right.
How long were you in the workforce? What were you doing during that time? And like, what has or has not changed in that industry or function, but doing that networking to figure out. The great thing now is there are so many micro courses, free online learning, like all kinds of opportunities to just get a little bit. When people come up to me and say, well, I'd been out of work, so I went and did a master's program, I'm a little bit like, oh gosh, wow, that's a heavy investment of both time and money to get back into the workforce. There are way easier and cheaper ways to do it, both cheaper from a time perspective and a money perspective. So look into those. We work with a group. Well, first of all, Fairygodboss has a ton of great information on its site, of course. And we also have started doing some collaborations with a group called Career Karma, which is specifically focused on the boot camp market and kind of helping people find the right boot camp. So for those who are looking to get back into technical, for corporate stuff, there is a lot of like community colleges that have professional learning and things for look at your industry groups. If there's continuing education opportunities, going to networking conferences and things like that. So it sort of depends on what your industry is and what you're looking to get back into, but there's a lot of opportunities out there.
Great. One more question on the note of interview process. A few people asked this in various forms, but essentially, how do you overcome your own imposter syndrome and describe the gaps in, your resume or your gaps in technology? How do you, get the confidence to discuss those?
Long heavy pause. Yes. Hagit, exactly. I would love for you to start because I feel like yes.
Let me take this. First of all, I think the big advantage of coming into a internship kind of returnship interview is that they know all that. You don't have to address it. And that is something that I felt gave me so much confidence coming into the Path Forward interview, that I did not have in other interviews. Because in other interviews, I was not owning up to the gap. Hell no. I was trying to hide my gap and hide that because I know that there is a bias towards someone who is currently doing something. So I presented what I was doing on my own, which I kind of considered more of a learning opportunity and an exploration, as something that I was serious about. And just kind of worked through that. But coming into the Path Forward interview, that was off the table. And I think for me, that had a huge impact on how I did the interview, because I said, well, they know all that. They're not going to probe painfully into that area like a dentist. No, they're going to just let me shine in the areas that I want to. And that kind of happened because I also thought it would happen. It's that kind of confidence thing. You tell yourself it'll happen and it does. So that's one thing that I think the Path Forward interview really gives you, is that confidence and use it.
Yeah. Nima, what about you?
Yeah, I would say, the imposter syndrome and the rebuilding confidence, that's like the singular thing where we get in our own way. So just being aware of that is a great first step. But in terms of addressing it, I think, I had a thought, hold on, let me wait for it to come back. So this is what I was gonna say. I at some point decided that I wasn't gonna work for a company unless they kind of knew all of me, which meant, just the idea of bringing your whole self to work, and they needed to know that I was a parent of young kids. And so I think just starting to think of it through that lens, and think about the new skills that you've gained, and that what you can bring to your job. Like, I think I'm like killing this job compared to my prior work, and I have so much more passion. And a lot of it is because I have less time. And so I have to make the most of it. So just, start, thinking of it or framing it in a way of what can you bring to your next role that you wouldn't have been able to prior to taking a career break, because that is a ton of value right there.
Yeah, my biggest piece of advice here is just practice, right? Practice answering questions. It's not a natural thing to talk about yourself, even though it's our own favorite subject. So practice answering these questions, and the model that I give for answering questions about the gap, because even in a returnship, they may just casually and the easiest way to construct it is to talk about I had a career of 5, 10, 15 years doing X, Y, Z. I was out of the workforce for this amount of time, taking care of my family. Now that my youngest child is in kindergarten, high school, college, ran off to the circus, whatever, no judgment. I'm now ready to get back into the workforce. And why I'm really excited about this opportunity is because boom, 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 right? And you've quickly taken the focus off of that one little piece or even big piece and onto the thing that's what they really care about, which is, can you do this job?
Yeah, definitely.
Great. It looks like we've gotten like 40 or 50 variations of basically the same question. So I'm going to get it out right now. But essentially, where can people find a full list of programs, stay up to date on new cities that are offering programs, find their remote positions? Where can they find all of the information about returnships? Where should they go?
It's funny. I would love to say there's one thing, here's the one, bookmark this one site. And that doesn't really quite exist. Like I said, we're trying, and I'll go ahead and put it up again just so you can see it. We're trying to do that with our the returnships around the US page, and we're trying to list as many of those as possible. Any opportunity that comes up through Path Forward, we blast that all over the place. So you'll get, if you've signed up for our emails, those are all over our site. For people who are looking for other types of opportunities, not returnships, right, there are a couple good places. There's Flex Jobs. There's a couple sites that are focused on remote work. Power to Fly is one I know of that does a little bit more on the remote work front. So unfortunately, there isn't a thing. There's many things, but it's partly, I'll go ahead and let me put my positive spin as I do on everything. It's partly because there's so much happening right now. There are so many organizations out there that are tackling these issues from different perspectives and offering different types of opportunities. So there's probably a couple different places that you want to be signed up for alerts and newsletters and things like that, that you can find these opportunities.
Cool. Another question that's really interesting that we've gotten from a few people: if I find a company that I really want to work with, but they don't offer a returnship program, A, does Path Forward contact them to encourage a program? Or B, how can I contact them myself and encourage them to, take me in a returnship over a random intern?
So we spend lots of time all day, every day, day and night, reaching out to as many companies as possible. We are trying to get this program in as many companies as we can across the country. So that's the work and the mission that we've signed up for. While I certainly appreciate the idea of asking them if they would work with Path Forward, please don't feel that's necessary. What I do tell people is the magic of the returnship is not about Path Forward or even the returnship label itself. It's the ability for somebody to see what you can do. So what I do encourage people to do if they're interested in a company that doesn't currently have a program is to figure out a way to offer to do a project for them or do some work for a period of time. Do they do contract works? Do they do temporary work? Can you find a way to show them what you can do in a way that from their perspective as an employer feels a little bit more managed from a risk perspective? That's part of what makes the returnship work for a lot of employers. So thinking about opportunities to do that and think about doing freelancing or consulting work. Because it's just, to Hagit's point, right, was a way that she kept in it and was able to show some stuff, but can lead to full-time opportunities at those companies or organizations.
Cool. And now this question, I'm assuming will vary, so it's for everybody, but how flexible are returnships? Are there set start dates, hours, or do I have the ability to kind of talk with my employer and change that around a bit?
So a little bit, it depends. As I said in the beginning, they do tend to be full-time corporate jobs. So if you're looking for something that's really different from that, but if you're looking for one day work from home, we have many companies that do offer those kinds of flexibility. And you can often have that conversation during the returnship and just understand, I mean, sometimes many companies have their flexibility policies, that's part of their benefits package. So you can kind of see what types of flexibility they offer as an employer. In terms of the returnship itself, some companies are open about their start dates. They do often try to work with a cohort and have a common start date across that cohort. Mm-hmm. And some companies do have specific start dates that they're looking to hit because of their corporate budgeting and stuff like that. So Walmart, for example, where Hagit did hers, this last group started in August because for them, November gets very busy. I can't imagine why November and December are busy at Walmart, but apparently they are. So they wanted the returnship part of the program to be wrapped up. So those who were converting into full-time could be working full-time, and those who were not going, right, like the managers needed to have that support piece done before the holiday season really got into full gear. So they ran their program from August to the middle of November. I recognize that August may not be a time that some people can go back to work. There are other opportunities. So I would say I don't encourage people to try to get a company to change what they're doing, because often the support around it, like there's other things that may be a reason that is driving that. But some companies are more flexible. They're willing to start the returnship when you can start it. So it just depends on the employer.
Got it. I'll try and get to two more questions. But are certain cities or states better than others for returnships, and can or should I apply for a returnship out of state?
I don't recommend applying for returnships out of state. I don't recommend relocating for a returnship for sure. It's temporary. There's just no guarantees, and that's a big thing to do. And we do have a company now that has remote opportunities. But the one thing I would say, again, this kind of goes back to, like, I wouldn't try to push a company to do something that they aren't set up to do, because it's unlikely that they'll be set up to be successful for that, right? So if a company has set up a remote returnship, likely they've thought about the support that's needed for that. Applying for a returnship that's meant to be in a certain office and then asking for it to be remote may not be setting you up for the most successful experience. We see the most opportunities in the places where we see the most employment opportunities. So that is, that is just sort of the nature of the workforce overall. We did work with Walmart last year on returnships in Bentonville, Arkansas, which I was super excited about, because that felt like an opportunity to get some returnships in a place that probably doesn't have a lot of them. We're working as hard as we can to spread them everywhere. But certainly New York and San Francisco and Chicago and those are the places we see a lot of opportunity.
That makes a lot of sense. And then finally, how many people go through Path Forward's returnship program every year?
Oh, it's growing every year. So, which is exciting. We've had 400 historically, so 400 graduates in our total pool of graduates. We anticipate having a couple hundred this year in 2020, for sure, between the spring program and the fall. We do generally run programs in the spring with returnships starting in February, March, going through June, July, and then another set of programs that run from August, in the case of Walmart, through start dates in August, September timeframe through the end of the year. So those are our two cycles. So I would say this year we'll probably have, let's call it, 150, 200 people go in a program in 2020. So we're excited about that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's incredible. And well, that is just about time. So there were so many more questions that we just could not get to today. I left a link in the chat. It's to Path Forward's Fairygodboss group. Feel free to ask your question there and they will answer you. I'll also include their email as well as a replay of this entire webinar in a follow-up email coming to you later today. I want to say thank you so much to Tami, Hagi, and Nima again. This was a really great webinar and I think everybody learned a lot.
Samantha, thank you so much. Nima and Hagi, awesome. You did great. Thank you.
Thanks everybody, and we will catch you next time. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.